We've got lots of news to cover today, but you may have been seeing headlines about the RTX 50 Super GPUs either getting delayed or canceled. But what is the source of those rumors? Because another story to cover here is fake 9700X 3D leaks and how it happened. So remember, you do have to be careful of what are the sources of leaks and rumors before you read too much into them. We're also seeing the same source as the 50 Super being delayed here, saying that the 5060 Ti 16GB could be facing shortages, lots of other stories to talk about here. But if you're thinking about buying a GPU right now, you really should take a look at the used market, especially if you're at the budget end of the spectrum. The RTX 3060 12GB I can find right now with a 3-fan model from Jawa.gg at $180. And a huge thank you to Jawa for sponsoring today's video, which means I can even get you $10 off your first purchase using code OWEN10. If you're not familiar with Jawa, you can buy, sell gear here. You can get entire custom PCs, find exactly what you're looking for, and check out some of the early holiday deals. And if you're shopping around Black Friday, from November 22nd to December 2nd, Jawa is dropping an epic deal every day, from $300 off select custom PCs to RTX 4080s for just $550. You should check back every day around Black Friday to see what sort of crazy deals that they have going. You can find exactly what you're looking for with their PC Finder. You can shop by theme. You can fund your upgrade by selling your own gear at Jawa. They'll even buy GPUs and CPUs directly. You can get an instant offer clicking this button. But again, you could create your own listings, even make a side business selling stuff on Jawa yourself. There's great reviews. Follow the link in the video description and or pinned comment. But back to these rumors at the 50 series super GPUs reportedly postponed to Q3 2026. Again, some headlines have been reading that they're going to be canceled. Now, this seems to be stemming from a couple of things. Number one, that RAM pricing is going just absolutely through the roof right now. And the main selling point of the 50 super cards is increased VRAM capacity. So while these cards may have been planned, if the pricing no longer makes sense and would, if they release at the price people would want, maybe NVIDIA feels like the margins wouldn't be there. You could see how these types of rumors could get going. Now, there wasn't a lot of hard evidence of this being the case, though. And when videocards.com posted that RTX 50 Super refresh faces uncertainty amid reports of 3GB GDDR7 memory shortage, Megasize GPU, who is a well-known GPU leaker, has leaked things correctly in the past. And that's where you have to kind of look at the sources of these rumors, specifically saying no cancellation yet, just delayed, now planned to launch in Q3 of 26, previously set to launch Q1 of 26. Now, again, honestly, there's a couple of things here. Number one, can you really say something's been delayed if it actually was never officially announced? But, maybe the plans are slipping date-wise. But if they start to slip into Q3 of 26, you also have to ask the question, does it even make sense to launch them at all? Because wouldn't we be expecting, if we see a normal release cadence, that Q4 of 26 would be a potential launch for the next generation of cards, except maybe that slips into further into 27. In other words, if we do end up getting a Q3 26 launch for the 50 Super Series cards, I'd be a bit concerned about what that means for how long we have to wait for the 60 Series cards, which would be my bigger concern. But we'll have to see what happens. Now, as part of the same kind of series of tweets, we also got Megasize GPU replying to hardware. Is it Canucks? I feel like I said it wrong once, and now I keep doubting myself. Not Canucks, it's Canucks, right? Anyway, these DRAM pricing trends we called out last week have now expanded to midterm shortages. NVIDIA might need to scale back, delay, or outright cancel their Super Series plans, especially on the laptop side. And then again, Megasize GPU replying to this with 5060 Ti 16GB will be in short supply very soon. Again, if RAM prices going up, availability going down, supply-demand issues, again, all of this driven by AI data center demands, you could maybe see where that would be the case. But again, when we're looking at leaks and rumors, again, Megasize GPU has had some good track record in the past. but it is very important to be, have a healthy doubt of anything that is not official announcements. Remember, the 50 series supercards have never been officially announced by NVIDIA. This is all based on leaks and rumors, again, from some credible sources who have got things correct in the past. But that is a very important thing to remember because, for example, this is a really interesting post to read. My friends and I accidentally faked the Ryzen 7 9700X 3D leaks. This is how we did it and why you can't trust online bench databases. So I don't think I ever reported on this particular rumor, but there were rumors going around about a Ryzen 7 9700X 3D. A benchmark had showed up on Passmark, and something seemed odd about it, specifically that it had higher clock speeds than the 9800X 3D, which doesn't really make sense based on what we would usually think of these slightly downbinned X3D parts that we've seen in the past, where usually they're ones that wouldn't quite cut the normal metrics for binning for the higher end part, like in this case it would have been the 9800X 3D. You would really expect it to be basically a 9800X 3D with slightly slower clock speeds if it fit like the typical pattern. So this seemed kind of strange. Now, it turns out that the people who caused this confusion seem to have done it accidentally and want to explain how it happened, and again, why you can't necessarily trust random leaks in benchmark databases. So what this really boils down to is that you can, there are ways to spoof the CPU info that your CPU is reporting to the benchmark database, which they were playing around with and claim that they didn't intend for it to be published to the online database. They were just trying to see if you could spoof that. And they go into a little bit of detail about how they did that. That's beyond the scope of this video. I'll link all my sources in the video description today as usual. But anyway, that's the idea, is that they can spoof the CPU info to say whatever they wanted it to be. So what they actually had was a 9700X that just was using higher than normal clocks. It was not an X3D part at all, but they changed the name to a 9700X 3D, and not only did Passmark accept that, but then it got published to the online database. And then the Redditor here is talking about how him and his friends then found it pretty interesting when suddenly there was a bunch of, articles about this, etc. Some of them mentioned how the clock speeds seemed a bit off from what you would expect. But anyway, that kind of just illustrates how in the PC tech hardware space, there's official news and then there's leaks and rumors, and all of these things get reported on, but it is really important to, note those differences, right? So again, the entire existence of supercards is just leaks and rumors. It has never been official. Now, the types of sourcing we have for those do generally have good track records. And again, mega-sized GPU seem to have inside information, probably from, within like the board partner channels, et cetera, in the past. So, I would put this as higher credibility than I would put just a random benchmark thing showing up in a database, which, as is pointed out here, can definitely get spoofed. These guys claim to have not intended that to get published widely, and then reported on how they did that here. By the way, because they reported on how they did it here, I would say that you may end up seeing some people playing around with what they've reported they've done here, and then doing the same thing. So I would say, especially for a little while after this particular Reddit post, I would be pretty suspicious of any strange sounding, CPU parts showing up in online benchmark databases. Speaking of which, AMD Ryzen 5 7500X 3D appears in Geekbench with a 4.5 gigahertz boost clock and 8% slower than a 7600X 3D. So when something like this pops up, again, leaks and rumors, we have to ask ourselves, so do we put any stock in this? Well, for this particular one, I would actually say I think this one's legit. Now, that's because we can get some corroborating evidence, which is that Micro Center has already listed a gaming PC with a Ryzen 7500X 3D inside of it. So that would then put some additional evidence behind this particular listing. Now, is it possible that Micro Center could have listed something, with an error or by accident or something? Yeah, absolutely. But the fact that we're seeing a leaked benchmark with additional corroborating evidence from a different source, again, so when you're dealing with the leaks and rumors, etc., that's certainly interesting. Now, a 7500X 3D is certainly interesting. Now, also, it's reported that there's a 7600X 3D version of this also listed at Micro Center at a $100 price point. So that could indicate that, there could be real savings by getting this. And if it's only slightly slower, could be interesting. Now, with these kind of downbinned X3D parts, and again, to be clear, this one has not been officially announced by AMD or anything, right? We're going off the leaks and rumors. But in the previous versions of these, if these are just downbinned parts, sometimes we don't see like a global release to all major retailers with lots of supply. We've seen sometimes particular region locks or particular retailer locks, like sometimes Micro Center. I think they were the only ones to get, was it the 5600X 3D or the 7600X 3D? I think the point is, like, some of these have been locked to particular retailers, etc. So maybe if the 7500X 3D is real, maybe it ends up just being a kind of a limited thing at Micro Center only or something like that. We'll have to see, but it is certainly an interesting part if it does get at least some people, maybe who live near a Micro Center, access to a better price to performance ratio kind of thing. Now, speaking of that, there was an interesting video from Hardware Unboxed today. They bought the Ryzen 5 9500F, which is currently China region specific, although, they were able to buy it on AliExpress, I believe. Now, this is a similar idea to the 7500F, which has never been particularly readily available in the United States, which is why a lot of times people are like, when I'm recommending, more value-oriented builds, how come I'm not talking about the 7500F? It has not had good availability in the United States. Again, the 9500F currently, I think, China exclusive, but again, could end up seeing broader support here. So anyway, I'll just link you to this video from Hardware Unboxed. In the video description, I'll say that performance-wise, there were no surprises here. It's slightly slower than the 9600X, which is what you would expect. So it really just depends on if the availability and pricing makes sense compared to buying a 9600X in your particular region, if this does end up becoming available. Now, another story we're seeing here is that Samsung has confirmed LPDDR6 memory with 10.7 gigabit per second bandwidth at CES 26. I saw this at videocards.com. Again, all my sources linked in the video description. But this is coming from, I think announcing what will be discussed at CES. Now, this would be a improvement over, we currently have LPDDR5X, which is 8,533 megatransfers per second here. It looks like the LPDDR6 going up to 10.67 gigatransfers per second, and then to 14.4 gigatransfers per second. Anyway, so that's interesting. Now, again, this isn't really that useful for the desktop PC space, but if you're my thought is in the kind of APU integrated graphics space. Like, I like my Steam Deck a lot. I'm kind of interested in that handheld gaming PC landscape, where I think oftentimes when you're on the integrated GPUs, it's actually the memory bandwidth when you're sharing it with the system that can be a limiting factor to the gaming performance. So it's interesting to me. Again, we'll have to see what kind of prices these hit, what kind of systems they end up in. But yeah, it's just something to keep an eye on. Now, speaking of the gaming PC handhelds, Aya Neo has launched their next two. Although by launched, I mean, I think they've officially talked about a lot of it, but so it's more of like an official unveiling. It had already been sort of teased earlier, though. but it doesn't look like this. We still have complete specs. Like they've said, it's like a high-end screen, but I haven't been able to track down specifically, like, is it OLED? What's the refresh rate? Is it variable refresh rate? Etc. So there's still some things we want to know here, but this one is one of the upcoming Ryzen AI Max Plus 395 based gaming handheld PCs, which are really interesting because this part is really kind of overkill for a handheld. And, if you're going to get its full potential, you would be running at a wattage that doesn't make a lot of sense for running off of battery. That being said, if you have a big enough battery pack and then maybe you tune things down a little bit, unless you're plugged in directly, the amount of performance you could get out of something like this is pretty interesting. I have checked out the AI Max 395 in a not a handheld PC, but a mini PC. I tried out Borderlands 4 on it, and I mean, you can get a surprising amount of performance out of this, but also there's the issue of cost, because systems with this chip are not really cost effective either. But again, I'm interested in the handheld space, so just thought I'd throw that out there. Now, speaking of the handheld space, this is not really a PC, but I'll throw this in this section of the news video, where cloud streaming is finally out of beta for the PlayStation Portal handheld. Now, the PlayStation Portal, when it first launched, was heavily criticized as being pretty limited use case because it was for streaming games off of your PS5. But it's like, could we not build in some cloud streaming to increase the functionality here at least a little bit, since it doesn't play anything natively itself? So it looks like that it is finally out of beta and officially available for PS Plus Premium users. So I thought I'd report that here in case, maybe you had one of these and hadn't been using it much or something. It does now have some additional functionality if that ends up making that more worth your while there. Now, while we're on the topic of PlayStation, there is, again, we're back to leaks and rumors here, so be careful, right? This may not happen. But there is some sign that PlayStation 5 PC cross-buying could be being worked on. We might get it eventually. But again, this is based on kind of data mining stuff and seeing references to cross-buy and seeing some icons that could indicate cross-buying. So, there's some chance that that's the case, but also a cross-buy feature doesn't necessarily have to mean PlayStation 5 PC cross-buying. It could also be there's a rumored PlayStation handheld coming out, and maybe it could be PlayStation 5 / handheld, PlayStation handheld cross-buy. So it could mean other things. But I think this would be cool because, I do have a PS5. I mostly game on my gaming PC. But it would be nice if, I bought a game for my PS5, if I could also play it on my PC or vice versa, because sometimes it's more convenient to be on the console. Anyway, so that would certainly be a value-added feature that I would like to see. But, well, like I said, this is very much in the rumors based on data mining side of things, nothing officially announced like that. Now, another thing we're seeing is that OLED monitors continue to innovate in certain, feature sets, etc. So as the pricing has come down to then offer models that can justify that $1,000 price point, you have to offer something we haven't seen before, right? So Asus now has a 27-inch tandem ROG Swift OLED monitor that, to be clear, is a 1440p monitor, but can switch in by tandem. It means it has a dual mode. You can cut it to half the resolution per axis. So essentially meaning you'd be in blocks of 4 pixels per 1 pixel at native resolution to essentially give you a 720p screen. But in that mode, it can run at 720 hertz. So that would be your ultra competitive esports mode. And again, OLED monitors already have super fast response times, and you don't get a lot of the pixel blur, etc. So getting one pumped all the way up to 720 hertz, certainly interesting. But again, that means it's priced a lot higher than what we've been seeing for with things like this coming in, you start to see like $400 1440p 240 hertz OLEDs, where it's like, honestly, for most people, that's probably good enough. But again, it's kind of cool to see these things happening. And like I said, the knock-on effect of these types of features coming out is that we start to see the other ones dipping in price. And again, there's like a version of a similar monitor coming out that's at a lower refresh rate without the tandem mode. That's coming in at $599 with 280 hertz, right? By the way, when the monitor's not in its 720p 720 hertz mode, it runs at 540 hertz at 1440p. So I'm gonna be 100% honest. If I could play at native 1440p 540 hertz, I would find the use case of switching into the 720p 720 hertz mode to be pretty niche. So yeah, I don't know. That 540 hertz probably good enough. I'm just thinking to myself. And also remember, if you're thinking like, but that's almost 200 more hertz. But if you think about that in terms of how long a frame is on the display, in other words, if we think of that in terms of milliseconds of frame time, it's not actually a massive increase, right? Because you're talking smaller like percentage increases, or you could think of it as, like I said, actual milliseconds of time. It starts to get less noticeable. So like there's a huge difference from 60 to 120 if we're talking hertz. And you're like, but that's only a 60 hertz change, and this is more than 60 hertz. But as like a proportion of how long it's on the screen, or a total number of milliseconds reduced, it's a lot less of a dramatic change. Anyway, now, another thing that's interesting to report on is just the general state of the gaming CPU market and how AMD is just absolutely dominating Intel, at least in the like DIY, I'm buying the part separately. Now, Amazon is certainly not the entire DIY sales of CPU market, but it's obviously one of the largest retailers. So if you look at what sort of market share we're seeing there, it can give us a picture of what it's likely like at other, retailers. Again, though, this is not talking about buying pre-built systems, where Intel has generally had a strong foothold with, laptop manufacturers and pre-built desktop systems, et cetera. So this is not giving us a look into that. This is just people buying individual CPUs on Amazon. But the data is out here, posted by Tech Epiphany on Twitter for October, and in the Amazon US sales, AMD sold 52,800 units to Intel's 10,200. That's 83.8% market share for October on the US Amazon, CPU sales chart. If you look at it as revenue, it's a similar split. With $14,364,406.50 for AMD, which is 82%, and Intel at $3,147,928, which is about 18%. The average sale price is actually higher for Intel at $308.62, where AMD is at $272.05. And you can look at like the top selling models, etc. But yeah, that is pretty interesting stats because, there was a time, which, I guess I'm old, so it doesn't seem that long ago, where like AMD was on the verge of bankruptcy before they got to Ryzen. And they were just having to absolutely compete on price just to try to get any sales out there. And then each generation just got a little bit better. Intel kind of stagnated. It's been interesting to see this flip happen. But again, on the other hand, I'd really like to see Intel start to come back here. So now I don't want them to come back because AMD stagnates. So I want AMD to keep pushing forward. Do not take your foot off the gas pedal. But I want Intel just to fight back hard here, because again, the more competition we have here, the better for the person trying to buy their parts for their gaming PC, right? So I want some strong competition here, looking like a bit of a bloodbath right now for the AMD Intel, at least in the DIY buying the individual CPUs segment. Now I want to give a couple little gaming related takes. So, a while back, when Borderlands 4 released, I did a series of videos on the performance of the game. I didn't think it was particularly good. The CEO of Gearbox who is not the same thing as the CEO of Take-Two, the, I believe, publisher for the Gearbox, which is the game developer, seems to be more in agreement that actually the PC performance issues could have been enough of an issue that it gave them softer sales than they would have liked. Now, he's confident they'll have a long tail. Also, are you guys interested in me going back to Borderlands 4 for any sort of retesting? There have been a number of patches, and since I did some benchmark runs, which I could repeat now on a fully patched, well, at least up-to-date patched version of the game, I could get some direct comparison data at the same graphic settings on the same hardware and see if performance has improved, and if so, by how much at the same settings. So it's something I certainly could do, but I've noticed that the Borderlands 4 interest, has kind of died down a bit. So as a content creator, you do have to consider, is there actually still any interest in this type of video, or am I going to be spending a day benchmarking stuff and producing a video that nobody ever even wants to watch, right? So I don't know. Let me know if there's some interest in that. Now, another just kind of game-related topic that's still PC gaming related here, so I can fit in the news video that I find interesting, is over here at PC Gamer. I'm seeing that 23 years later, Morrowind on controller and Steam Deck just got a million times better. The latest version of OpenMW, that's Open Morrowind, is out now. Now, I've got to say that Morrowind has a special place in my heart as like one of my like foundational gaming memories growing up. This just absolutely blew my mind about what a video game could even be. It was just absolutely complete game changer on my understanding of what a world in a video game could be like. It was incredible. Now, that being said, certainly a little rough around the edges these days. So Open Morrowind is I believe, if I understand the mod correctly, maybe they report a bit more on the details here, is a engine replacement. Right? This is an open source engine replacement for Morrowind, which is interesting. Now, we're only up to version 0.50, which is certainly not a 1.0 release, and there's a lot of other stuff that they want to work on, but I guess one of the big updates here was controller support, which means that if you're playing this on something like a Steam Deck, it suddenly got a lot more interesting with that controller support. Now, along the lines of controller support, I'll be honest that my first time I played this, my PC was not up to snuff, and I played it on Xbox, and the fact that this was even running on Xbox was pretty interesting. We don't need to go down a rabbit hole of to even make this work on the original Xbox was pretty insane. Like, I didn't understand it at the time. I knew that the load screens could be incredibly long. It later came out that they were doing a soft reboot of the console during some load screens. It's absolutely insane. Anyway, the point is, this is pretty interesting if you have, like me, a soft spot for Morrowind. Still by far my favorite Elder Scrolls game. I understand that, maybe it could use some certain systems don't probably interact well with the somebody used to more modern systems, like the hit registration, being completely you can just miss no matter how much you actually hit because it's completely stats based, etc. Anyway, I probably rambled on enough about this. Let's move along. Now, another big story that's been going around is that it's been reported, based on a survey by Atomic Research, that 72% of gaming industry executives say that Valve's Steam holds a monopoly on the PC games market. Now, the general reaction to this, I think, can be summed up pretty well by the Baldur's Gate 3 developer, Very AFK here, who says it's almost as if it isn't providing a this is a family-friendly show, service defined by public shareholder KPIs. So in other words, there have been so many attempts to have competing storefronts with Steam, but not only do they have such a head start, but it always kind of feels like other ones, I don't know, they just don't get it. Steam provides a good service. So I'm not a fan of monopolies, but until there's a service that is just better than Steam, And I don't know how you get to that point now, because even if you actually made something as good as Steam, how would you get somebody to switch from Steam to that if they're just like as good? Because if you already have your game library in one place, that's the other thing that's kind of hard to overcome at this point, is that with these digital game libraries that you build up over years and years and years, I mean, I'm going on decades now, it's like, yeah, that's all in one place. It's great. So why would I switch to something else? It's all right here. You would have to give me something that is dramatically better than what Steam already offers. And the competition just doesn't seem able to do that. So, and Steam continues to develop to just Steam, as long as Steam doesn't take its foot off the gas pedal or anything like that, I think I think they will continue to kind of have that monopoly, but it's just because they're better. Anyway, all right. I think I've rambled on enough here for today. Hopefully you did find the video useful and or interesting, and I hope all of you have an excellent day.